Persuasion. What is it? It is defined as an act or process or an instance of persuading. There are three different forms of persuading: ethos, pathos, and logos. Ethos is the ethical appeal. It is defined as an underlying sentiment that informs the beliefs, customs, or practices of a group or society, dominant assumptions of a people or period. Pathos is the emotional appeal. This form can be characterized as anything that has emotional quality to it or has to deal with feelings. And finally, logos is the logical appeal. This would come into play when deciding whether or not something makes sense or matches up with the rest of the story. All three kinds of persuasion are crucial to the persuasion process. Without any one, persuasion would immediately be more difficult because then the only other two would be used. Imagine not being able to use pathos, taking emotion completely out of persuasion, and only being able to rely on logic and the ethical appeal would almost be impossible. One popular form of persuasion is syllogism, or using deductive reasoning to come up to a conclusion. This entails two premises, or statements that both point to a conclusion. An example of this would be, if A equals B and B equals C, then A equals C. It was a common form of argument between people in Greece when no evidence was present to prove either side right or wrong. In today's era, it is not logical to use this type of reasoning because it can easily be proven wrong, and arguments today are won with evidence, not reason. Aristotle was one of the founders of persuasion, and his teachings are still studied today. He believed that persuasion was important to make people believe the truth. It was his theory that people would not believe the truth even if it was presented to them, so this is why he created this was to persuade people about the truth. He did this through the form of syllogisms, like previously mentioned. He also taught that the three forms of persuasion also previously mentioned. It was his belief that this was the most productive way to persuade the audience of the speaker. We use persuasion in our everyday life, whether we know it or not. We can be easily persuaded by the way someone is dressed, or maybe they just give you that look and you know exactly what they mean by it. Both these examples show us how unconsciously we persuade or get persuaded. Syllogisms are also very influential in persuading us. Maybe not in the same way that Aristotle used them, but nonetheless are very influential. News is another example of syllogism. It is not very influential. It is very influential with its reports and always does a good job of persuading people.